This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
One might call this the age of the influencer, as platforms like YouTube and others seemingly create influencers overnight. But our guest on this Bizgnus Interview podcast, Teresa de Grosbois, is the influencer's influencer. She's been studying the ins and outs of influential people for years, putting her research into best-selling books and in front of audiences around the world. Teresa, we live in an era of influencers, if you don't mind. People on YouTube and everywhere, it seems, are influencing other people. First, give us your take on that world of influencers. Have I made too much out of it?
No, I actually think it's one of the greatest evolutions on the planet that's ever happened, because it used to be that you had to be a television anchor or a newspaper reporter. And even before that, you'd had to be the town crier or, someone who was heard by a lot of people to have any level of sway or influence. And now we've gotten to the point in society with the dawn of Web 2.0, where anyone with a passion who's out to really help and serve other people can now become an influencer. It's become quite easy. And so, one of the things I'm really passionate about is working with influencers to help them understand, okay, how do you use that influence now to have more impact and positive effect on the world?
You have been studying influential people and teaching influencing for years. What is the secret? Is there one golden secret to all of this?
Well, it's not so much a secret as a paradigm shift. I love to call it a paradigm shift, right? Because we all already have influence, right? Influence is just people know, like, and trust you enough that they'll take action based on your recommendation. That's all influence is. So mass influence then is just a lot of people know, like, and trust you enough that they'll take action based on your recommendation, right? So then it simply becomes an inquiry of, okay, how do we get a lot of people listening to us and trusting us enough that we can actually start to move the needle and cause change in the world? That's really all this conversation is.
You make it sound so simple, but obviously it's not. Otherwise, we'd have 8 billion people influencing each other equally, it would seem.
Yeah, well, I think the problem a lot of people have is we all learned a set of rules in the sandbox, right? Which were reinforced as we came up in business. Like, we learned things like, I do this for you and you do that for me. There's like a tit for tat thing that we learned when we were very young, right? And then that was reinforced in business. We learned things like, if you want to get in relationship with a colleague, maybe you buy them lunch or coffee, and then that should start some reciprocity between us, right? And you only have to phone up the head of a Fortune 500 company and offer to buy them lunch. And faster than you can say gatekeeper, you'll learn that there's a different set of rules that apply to the highly influential, right? They operate under a different etiquette. They operate under a different paradigm. And a lot of what it comes down to is most people simply just don't understand the habits that the highly influential operate under, the paradigm shift that it requires. And when they get it, it's so easy to become influential that it actually is very simple.
When in trying to reach that paradigm, you have to go against a lot of things like we were taught, well, the king puts his pants on one leg at a time, just as you do.
Yes.
How do you get beyond that?
Well, and it is true. Influencers are just human beings too, right? And, one of the reasons we created the Evolutionary Business Council was to help people who are starting to step into the realm of influence understand, how do you understand influencers? How do you approach them? How do you get in relationship with them? Because they are real people, but do it in a way that, makes sense, right? I think the biggest mistake so many of us make is that we don't understand that influencers become overwhelmed with demands on their time. That's the first thing that happens in the world of influencers, right? Everybody wants a piece of them because they're influential. And so they don't value their time the same as a regular person, right? Now they've got massive time stress coming at them. So, a request to take an influencer for coffee is actually a demand for time that they might not be able to afford to give to you. So it's important that you start to understand the paradigm that influential people operate under, and how do you create reciprocity with influential people like we would with anyone else in our lives.
You mentioned the Evolutionary Business Council. A strange name, I would think. Are we talking about evolution of man, so to speak, from the ape, or what?
Absolutely. I actually think one of the biggest shifts we'll ever see in humanity is the shift that's going on right now. And it's what most people consider consciousness, right? And there's a lot of different definitions of consciousness, but consciousness is really just mankind waking up and realizing that we are not our thoughts, right? And that our thoughts can be the biggest limiter in our lives. When we learn to question the way we think, when we learn to consider, is the way we're thinking really serving us? And, a lot of experts in the success field call that inner dialogue, right? Is our inner dialogue really serving us? Then we start to dive into the realm of consciousness. We start to be able to question our own thoughts. And when we can question our own thoughts, we can change the outcomes we're getting in life. And sometimes far greater levels of success, far greater levels of influence are available if we just stop tripping ourselves up and scaring ourselves out of doing things that we're meant to be doing anyway.
That would seem to be A, simple on the surface, but B, really, really hard to do. How do you teach people to get beyond the hurdles to get into that?
Well, one of the exercises we talk about a lot in the Evolutionary Business Council, we call it the EBC for short, is doing a lot of inner child work, right? Research is now showing that most of our self-limiting beliefs, all those things that tell us when, we tell ourselves something's too scary, we have all kinds of beliefs that stop us from succeeding at things, right? I'm too dumb, I'm too tall, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at speaking in public, I'm too Black, I'm too white, I'm too Hispanic. Nobody's going to listen to me if I speak anyway. As human beings, we all run around with 1,000 of these thoughts in any given hour. And research is now showing that most of us invented them before the age of 3. In fact, a lot of times at the age of 1.5 or 2, in the very earliest failures of our lives, we started telling ourselves things to try and make sense of them as a 2-year-old. And a lot of those limiting beliefs, or those beliefs that we created as a 2-year-old, stuck, right? In fact, I can even remember the moment in which I created my most significant negative self-talk as a child, right? I was about 2 years old. And what you wouldn't know about me if you didn't ask is I'm not only Canadian, I'm Northern Canadian, right? We used to spend our summers in a remote backwoods cabin. We'd go in by boat actually every summer. And, just in time to see the hatching of the little baby mosquitoes. It's Canadian humor, right? And, so my family was my whole world because I was the youngest of a huge family. I'm the youngest of 9. And I remember one year we were just back from the cabin and we're all standing around the kitchen of our very old house, and the kitchen's just packed with my cousins and my aunts and uncles. And the room is buzzing with excitement because my grandmother's taking everyone to the movies, which in our family is a really big deal. It's way too far and way too expensive. We just never go to the movies. And I look across the room just in time to see my mom say, "Teresa can't go, she's too little." And in that moment of utter devastation, I decide I'm too small to play with the big kids. And that inner dialogue for me stuck. Now, the really interesting thing about an inner dialogue like that is I then started spending all of my time doing one of 2 things: desperately terrified that it was true, or desperately trying to prove that it wasn't true, right? So go figure that I should eventually grow up to become an expert on influence, because the whole conversation of importance became highly important to me at the age of 2, right? So this is the case for many of us. In those first devastating moments of our lives, we make up some idea about ourselves that we then continue to live into and make an important conversation in our lives. And it not only inhibits our success, in some cases, it may drive our success.
Teresa, how did you get interested in how people are influenced and become influencers? It's not necessarily taught in college.
No, in fact, I think once I started to get present to, okay, I've got an inner dialogue that's driving me around what's important about important people, right? So I actually started just becoming passionate, even from a very young age, looking at why are people listening to that person and not that person? Why does that person have so many followers? Why does so many people love that person? And I started noticing things, right? I started noticing that important people, influential people, and my childhood brain called them important, but really what we were talking about was influential people. Influential people behave and operate differently. They have a different scorecard for how they determine how they use their time. And when you start to realize, it's a lot like a game we could play, when you start to realize the rules of the game, it's really not that hard to learn.
And so that is what got you into this, and you turned it into a profession.
Yeah. One of the reasons I created the Evolutionary Business Council was I saw so many good people that just want to change the world, that like those everyday heroes that are starting these grassroots movements, and they just don't understand how influence operates. And their own negative self-talk is tripping them up so much, right? Because nothing is scarier to us than our own dreams of really making a difference in the world, right? Because to us, that's huge. Like, they're your dreams. What could be bigger than that, right? And yet, no one is better hardwired to go do your mission, your dream of actually making a difference in the world than you are, because nobody else is going to be more passionate about it. Nobody else is going to persevere like you will. So ironically, the very reason that we're so passionate about it is the thing that most stops us as human beings from a negative self-talk standpoint.
The EBC, do you have local chapters around the world, or is it one central thing, or what?
We are an international organization. We do most of our calls and meetings right now online. So although we do meet at the community level in a COVID world, we're mostly doing everything online. So it's not necessary to join an individual chapter. It is a really cool opportunity to meet some amazing people doing some wonderful grassroots movements all over the world.
Now, you are a Canadian, but we are talking to you while you are in Costa Rica. Tell us a little bit about that move.
Several years ago, a number of us members of the Evolutionary Business Council came up with the idea, wouldn't it be fun if we actually built a physical community where we could all, move in and out of, interact as people who are all about changing the world. And so we came down to Costa Rica and founded a little intentional community. It's founded on the principles of consciousness and sustainability. And founded it around a retreat center where we can host retreats teaching principles of successful business and successful living and health. It's called Vista Mundo in Costa Rica. So we're having a lot of fun with it.
Now, you have put a lot of your ideas into books over the years. Tell us about your most recent book and where people can get it.
The book I'm most proud of my most recent book is Mass Influence: The Habits of the Highly Influential. And in fact, right now we're giving the digital version of it away for free because we're on our 7th anniversary of being on the bestseller lists. So if your listeners would like to get the digital version of that for free, if you go to massinfluencethebook.com, not only do we send you to all the different websites where you can download it for free, it's on Kindle and iBooks and Smashwords, all the different sites. You can also sign up for our 30-day influence challenge, which is just 30 days of really quick 2-minute exercises. It's kind of like we teach you the paradigm shift of how do you become highly influential just by giving you quick little exercises every day so that you start doing it and embodying it. And by the end of 30 days, you'll really understand the different paradigm the influential operate under.
Teresa, you have been very generous with your thoughts and observations and giving us ideas of where we can go, et cetera. What would you like to add that we haven't talked about?
I would say if you're sitting listening to this, I would say give yourself permission to be outrageous in the pursuit of your dreams. And I don't just mean your dreams to have more stuff, which are valid and appropriate dreams, like hedonistic pleasures are important in life, like those pleasures that just make us happy in the moment, But the kind of happiness that lasts and really sticks in your bones is what Aristotle used to call eudaimonia, which is knowing that we're of deep service to our community or the world at large. And most of us have something in our heart, or why doesn't somebody just, why doesn't somebody just, help kids with this ailment? Or why doesn't somebody just help our community, fix this problem? Or why doesn't somebody take on this disease and really help people with this disease? And if you've got a why doesn't somebody just like that, I would encourage you. In fact, I bless you and tell you as of this day, you are somebody. And why don't you go and do it? Because there's probably no one as passionate about it as you. And in fact, if you need support in following your passion and doing it, come check out the Evolutionary Business Council, because that's what we're there for. We're there to support the grassroots heroes that really just want to make a difference in the world.
You've been watching the Biznews Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.